Hi everyone, I hope you're having a really good weekend. Last day of the weekend. And yesterday morning and Friday morning there were two book sales, two library book sales. And the one on Saturday was kind of disappointing. The one on Friday morning was really wonderful because it was held in this big gymnasium and they said that they had about 100,000 books there. And I wouldn't be surprised if they had every single one. So what I want to do first is get the books from yesterday out of the way. Like I said, there are only three. It was a much smaller library. The first one is by a popular writer on the history of religion by the name of Bart Ehrman. This kind of looks like a textbook, and I guess you might be able to sort of use it as one. But it's sort of kind of a source book of sorts. It's called the New Testament, a historical introduction to the early Christian writings by Bart Ehrman. And it has just chapters on, early Jewish apocalypticism, Jesus as a historical figure, the early ideas of Jesus in his own time, and up through the writings of the Gospels, and all of that good stuff. The first basically covers the ideas of the first couple of centuries of Christianity. Next, which I found in the fiction section, is Robert K. Massey's biography of Catherine the Great, which is not a fiction book, but there I found it. This is the one he came out with just a couple of years ago. He also wrote a really excellent biography of Peter the Great, as well as one on the Romanovs and a few others. And the last one that I found at the sale yesterday is by a historian named Robin Lane Fox. It's called Pagans and Christians. See the subtitle, it's rather long. Religion and the Religious Life from the 2nd to the 4th century A.D., when the gods of Olympus lost their dominion, and Christianity with the conversion of Constantine triumphed in the Mediterranean world. So it's kind of chunky, too. The pages are a little thick, but it's still 800 pages long. So on to the haul from Friday morning, which was much more successful. And I got 19 books there. So we have 22 in total to look for. If you're interested in any of them, they'll all be in the drop-down box. So if I go over them too quickly, which shouldn't be a problem because I usually like to talk too much. This first one is by a writer I'd never heard of, but it was a really beautiful book in brand new condition, and the subject looked interesting. I'll hold it up there, you can see it. The Americans, A Social History of the United States, 1587 to 1914 by J.C. Furness. I didn't recognize J.C. Furness's name, so I looked it up just a few minutes ago, and it turns out that he actually wrote for, was just sort of a popular writer. But the book looks pretty rigorous and interesting, and it even has a bibliography in the back, so that should be interesting. It's actually the first of a trilogy, even though it covers 350 years. The next one is by Robert Hughes, who is the same guy who wrote Fatal Shore, which is a history of Australia. This is a sort of artistic, social, cultural history of the city of Barcelona, which I would like to visit one day because I love tapas. And this was 50 cents, so yes, please. I don't read French, and my grasp of Latin and a couple of other languages is unfortunately pretty piss poor. But I love what little I know of this author, there we go, without the glare, Georges Bataille. And this is, I'm not sure if you can call it a novel. It says on the back that it's told in a series of first-person accounts, but it's obviously fiction. It might be sort of a collection of short stories that are sort of tied into a novel. It's called La Vessie, and it's about a set of dialogues between this modern-day libertine named Charles, and a priest who is so devout that he's nicknamed l'Abbé, and his name is Robert. I hadn't even heard of this book. I know Bataille's name. I know him as a philosopher and a sociologist, but I've never read any of his fiction, so I picked this up. Speaking of another philosopher who writes fiction, I think this is the only so-called novel that this person wrote. George Santayana, the Spanish-born Catholic American philosopher, sort of a contemporary of Henry James and Josiah Royce and other people like that. They were all at Harvard. This is called The Last Puritan, and the title describes it as a memoir in the form of a novel. I always thought it was just a novel, but this one I sort of recognize. They have all the books sitting up like this at the library sale because I have so many of them. And I was just sort of skimming over the spines, and this little thing popped up, Your Favorite Penguin. And so I picked it up, and I recognized the name as Polish, and picked it up and saw it was from the series that Philip Roth came out with quite a while ago, that he edited, I should say. The series is called Writers from the Other Europe, and I'm guessing they mean Eastern Europe. They've published some really wonderful stuff. That's how I first read my first Danilo Kiss novel. And this one is from a writer I don't think I recognize. And actually, I tried to type his last name in the drop-down box on a Word document first, and it kept deleting his name because it thought it was a typo. So I'll try to fix that, and if I can't, I'll just call him Tadeusz K. But his name is there we go, Tadeusz Konvicki, and the name of the book is A Dream Book for Our Time. It's about Poland in the immediate years after World War II. Here's a book I knew nothing about except for the fact that it was an NYRB title, and this is The Fox in the Attic by Richard Hughes. This is another author whose name I recognize but I've never read. This is Mahmoud Mamdani's Citizen and Subject, Contemporary Africa and the Legacy of Late Colonialism. And apparently, just by sort of glancing at the back, this is about the imperial rule of Africa and how Native Africans responded to it. A little bit of light reading. This is The Talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith. I saw the novel. I saw the movie when it first came out and absolutely loved it. So I never really even thought about paying $14. Oh my God, $14 for a paperback book, which I never would do. But for 50 cents, yes. This guy has sort of decreased in my estimation lately. A couple of years ago, he made some pretty horrible comments about, really sexist comments about being able to tell women's writing from men's because it wasn't as good. And ever since then, I've just sort of, do I really want to, I'm trying to, in good faith, separate my estimation of the person from my estimation of his work. So this will be a further exercise in that separation. Anyway, the writer is the Nobel Prize winner V.S. Naipaul, but the book is not a novel. It's called Among the Believers: An Islamic Journey, and it's basically about his trip through much of the Muslim world. On the back it says Iran, Pakistan, Malaysia, Indonesia, and probably some others. I looked it up online and there were even more. Anyway, he took several months out of his life to just sort of take this tour through much of the Muslim world. And this was written well before 9/11 or anything like that, and someone who's really sensitive to problems of colonialism and culture and the other. So as long as the other isn't a woman and a writer. Next, I found another book by Todd Gitlin. A couple of book hauls ago, I picked up another book by Todd Gitlin, which was about how the media covered the student countercultural movements of the 60s and how they tried to normalize them and sort of co-opt them in a very sort of corporatist way. This is along the same lines, but it has a different subject. Inside Prime Time, and the subtitle there is How the Networks Decide About the Shows That Rise and Fall in the Real World Behind the TV Screen. So it's basically how these TV executives cater to the lowest common denominator and shoot in all of these bright primary colors about dramatic things that are really meaningless and shallow and stupid, but we watch them anyway, or at least some people do. Okay, this is called The Devil and Mr. Casement, One Man's Battle for the Human Rights in South America's Heart of Darkness. And this is about Roger Casement, who was, I think he was an Irishman who went to South America and spent quite a bit of time there. And I remember hearing about this book when it came out a couple of years ago, but it's in beautiful condition, and it was $1. This is MacArthur's War, Korea, and the Undoing of an American Hero by Stanley Weintraub. Stanley Weintraub wrote a biography of Queen Victoria, which I showed you in another haul a couple of months ago, I think. And I've always sort of been curious as to the fall of MacArthur and sort of George Marshall and Harry Truman's hatred of him, especially coming up through Korea, so this should be interesting. Novel I'm sure everyone recognizes, Revolutionary Road by Richard Yates, which I've never read and didn't own. Okay, here are two books of a trilogy. Sort of bummed that they didn't have the third one, but they did have two of them, so I got those, and I'll keep an eye out for the third in the future. They're by Chalmers Johnson, who died a few years ago. He was the head of the Japan Research Institute. And Japan Policy Research Institute, I'm sorry. And he was sort of a critic of American militarism and imperialism, empire, that sort of thing. Vaguely from the left. I'm sure his critics would say completely from the left, but this volume is called The Sorrows of Empire, Militarism, Secrecy, and the End of the Republic by Chalmers Johnson. And this one is Blowback: The Costs and Consequences of American Empire. Next, I found 3 of these Virago classics. Virago Modern Classics, actually puts out books mostly by Antipodean or Antipodian women writers, that being writers from mostly New Zealand and Australia, and mostly from around the turn of the 20th century, so about 120 years ago. And there were a lot of really amazing women writers there that just really sadly aren't read anymore. I got 2 novels by Molly Keene, Devoted Ladies, and The Rising Tide, and then 1 by the actual rare American woman writer that they published. This was Elizabeth Hardwick. Elizabeth Hardwick's The Simple Truth. You can really never find Elizabeth Hardwick. I think all of her work is out of print. I think NYRB might have republished 1, but she was great friends with another one of my favorite critics, Susan Sontag, who really, really admired her work. So I thought I would pick that up. And last but not least, we have probably not his famous book, definitely not his most famous book, but it's by Richard Hofstadter, who's probably best known for his essay, The Paranoid Style of American Politics, but also his books, The American Political Tradition and Anti-Intellectualism in America. This is called The Progressive Historians Turner, Beard, Parrington by Richard Hofstadter. The Turner, Beard, Parrington are the 3 historians that he's talking about, all of which, I mean, especially Charles Beard, had a really profound effect on Hofstadter's writing and sense of historical moment. Hofstadter's a really, really important writer in his own right, and his own ideas are really, really fascinating. If anyone wants a really insightful critique into contemporary American politics, The Paranoid Style in American Politics is just a must read by Richard Hofstadter. So that's it, guys. That's 22 books in just under 18 minutes. That's better than I thought it would be. Have a good weekend, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.